Welcome, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you today. I'm so excited to discuss how we can help everyone love their CRM today. And just a little about me. I'm a farm-raised foster kid turned founder kid. I'm actually from Fresno, so excited. I grew up in Layton, Sanger, Riverdale, and Clovis. And so I'm excited to be with you today to kind of walk through this path about how you can transform your CRM into something amazing rather than something dreadful. So let's get started here. So first off, let's go through a little bit of how you can interact today. So there is a kind of question and answer interface. I would encourage you to use that as we go along. Please put the question in as soon as you have it so you don't forget about it. I'll do my best actually to answer those within kind of the slide and context if possible. Otherwise, I'll commit to you to answer all those questions either at the end when we have a little bit more extended time for Q&A, or after the session. I'll find some way to get it back to you with the CenCal Dreamin folks, but I want to make sure and get your questions answered today. All right, let's talk about what we're going to go through today. So we're going to talk about, why does the want matter? What's critical about tapping into this kind of secret, unseen, I don't know how secret it is, but it's certainly kind of a latent force to help you bring about great outcomes. We want to talk about who are the people who want to love their CRM, right? These people that work for you and have this kind of latent demand, and there's an opportunity to tap into that. What's the trail toward this delight, right? How do we get there and unlock this? And really, what's the cost of kind of leaving the defaults and not doing much, right? People are motivated by pain more than pleasure. So we're going to talk a little bit about that to bring an extra motivation. And then we're going to walk through one path to bring the want back to your CRM. And we'll go through a specific persona. So we'll kind of unlock that through an example today that you can take as a pattern and bring back to your business. And then we're going to have some Q&A time towards the end. So feel free. I have access to the Q&A here, and so I'll be watching that as we go along. And let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with a short clip to get us warmed up as to what it is that we're looking for. And you might have seen this and had a few chuckles prior. So let's go ahead and start the video, and we'll go from there. All right, I didn't hear audio. Maybe you heard the audio, but either way, we get the picture there that Michael's driving. There's a GPS. The GPS tells him to turn right, and there's a conversation between he and Dwight. And what we observe on this conversation is, one, the GPS voice and the screen seemed clear. It told him to turn right. The screen, when he looked at it, had a clear right turn with his position of where the vehicle was. And so it seemed a very logical thing that turning right should be very straightforward. Now, there was a disagreement between Michael and Dwight because they interpret what they saw very differently. So for example, to Dwight, the perceived directions, they can't be correct. They couldn't be true because he saw the lake. And so he's arguing with Michael that this cannot be true because there's a lake down this road. Now to Michael, the directions are the source of truth. He trusts the GPS, he trusts the process and the machine, and says, I don't care what I observe. This is what it said to do, and I'm moving forward. It's a very different way they interpret it. What else do we observe here? We observe that Michael and Dwight have different motivations towards following these directions. So for example, to Dwight, the directions are really secondary to what he perceives as right and correct. As he observes, he understands that it can't be true, and he even asserts this, that it can't say or can't mean what he thinks it says, what Michael thinks it says. And to Michael, the directions are the primary truth, even when he may perceive a problem. Because remember, Michael sees the lake as he's going forward, and it does not impact his pressing of the brake pedal. He just continues forward. So Michael and Dwight and many others endured the consequences of Michael's error. If you remember this clip, you remember that, yes, they have to escape, right, from the car. There's a lot of slipping and falling, and Dwight trying to help Michael up, and the basket they were trying to deliver gets ruined and it never gets delivered. And so there's somebody had to pay for the car, somebody had to get it towed. There was a lot of trouble this created for people beyond just Dwight and Michael. And I highlighted this as an example because we had a little bit of a, it's a process, right? Following the GPS, it's telling us the steps. There's a user interface, and we have two different people who interpret the directions that they're receiving in two very different ways. And this is likely very similar to what you're dealing with in your organizations and in your business. There are people who see and interpret those directions that are being received in very different ways. And so the quality of those directions and how they take into account the people who are wanting to follow them and wanting to kind of fulfill the outcome that they deliver is really important. So let's talk about who are the Dwight and Michael in your world. So I want to do this in the context of a persona. And so a persona is really a way of capturing key details about what motivates people, what behaviors they follow. Could be anything from, right, maybe they use gloves when they use the CRM, or they prefer to use their keyboard rather than their mouse. And what goals do they have, right? It's a way of capturing that. And the more diverse your team, the more personas you might have, right? So when we capture who is your Dwight and Michael or anyone else, we want to capture that kind of in the context of a persona. And context is really important here because the same person, right? So Dwight, for example, might use a system one way when he's in the office at his desk, and he might use the same system differently when he's in the car, on a mobile device, or even at home on his laptop. And so thinking about where people use these things is really important if we want to tap into what are the desires, the outcomes, the kind of appetite that we can leverage to help people fall in love with the CRM and give them what they want. Now, I will highlight one warning here. When you begin this process of kind of building out your personas and thinking about who are the people that we're serving and what are the right questions that we want to ask, there is this element of you're asking people to complain to you. And sometimes that's a little foreign. It's a little awkward. It's a little different than what managers and program managers are typically used to. And so once you encourage people to complain with a commitment that, you know what, this isn't going to be for nothing. We're going to partner with you to actually help solve these problems. After you do that, your team will be much more likely to kind of share what their potential solutions are and help that bottom-up innovation occur in the business. But it's really a challenging thing sometimes because many organizations have been ignoring this information for years. And so there might be a lot of it under the surface. And when you start asking for it, it can feel a little overwhelming. But it's a really, really good thing to do. And so I encourage you, yes, take it, right? There's a caveat here. There's probably some stuff that you haven't known about, but it's a really good thing to uncover and to partner with your team. So before we move on, let's get a couple concepts here just to evaluate a framework. How are we going to approach moving forward and building out that sense of want and love for the CRM? And so these are kind of some general concepts around this element called user experience. And user experience is not just, many people think about it that it's just the user interface. That's really one small part you can see down there on the left. The user experience is really what does a person perceive? How do they interpret? How do they feel about what it is that they're doing? And how easy is it to do? All those things are kind of in that broad category of user experience. And what we're going to focus on today are really just three areas of this. So the first one is the user interface, what people see. The second one is information architecture. This is essentially kind of how they see it and how it's organized. And the third is functionality, right? What does it do for people and how do they perceive what this helps them to accomplish? Because most users have a desire to deliver and to do the outcome that the business wants, but sometimes they can't clearly understand where do I go to actually get that outcome that I'm looking for. So the way I like to highlight is number one, for the user interface is clarify what they see. For information architecture, improve how they see it. And the third for functionality is just enable why they want to see it. Help them understand that this is where you go to achieve this outcome. And this over here is where you go to achieve the other outcome. So it's very clear for them to get started at the right locations. And the key here is we've all heard the carrot and the stick inside an organization. The carrot being the incentives that the business kind of lays out, the positive rewards, and the stick, which is the negative consequences that a business might lay out. Things like if your opportunity is not in here, you can't get paid a commission. That's a model that's commonly used. I want to suggest a third dimension of that, which I call the intrinsic ice cream. And the intrinsic ice cream is all layered on top of this. It's what all of us have already inside of our brains. I mean, how many of you go and you have a to-do list and you mark a couple things off the list? How does that feel? Isn't that awesome? The business didn't need to set up anything or provide any reward for you. That's just natural. We all have that in us. And so tapping into that is one way that we help users love their CRM. And so the way I look at this is when you tap into that intrinsic ice cream, you serve up 2 scoops of delight. And so what we're going to do is look at some examples of how to serve up that those 2 scoops of delight. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the ingredients of within Salesforce that we're able to put kind of together to create this picture and this, these 2 scoops of delight. And then we're going to go through an example with a test persona that we can walk through and see how we apply each of these items. I encourage you as we go along, we have covered a little bit so far, so feel free to add your questions here. I see some coming in. Please encourage you to keep filling those out in context, and I'm happy to add detail within the particular area. So let's walk through some examples here. Now, before we do that, we talked about ice cream, and I don't know about you, but there's a lot of people who like to feed ice cream to their puppies, which it's amazing to watch, but it can be controversial because other people really don't like that. In fact, I even heard there's ice cream trucks now going out for dogs. So what I'm highlighting here is similar to the alert before, right? That going through this process and kind of reorienting how you think about CRM, that rather than being like a very practical thing that we put in place so that our users can basically take it or leave it and get their work done, to kind of moving this a little bit differently and saying, well, how do we be user-centric? And how do we first smoke out what it is that our users really want and how we can help them and really enable them and let the user be the driver rather than the technology be the driver. And that's the real promise of Salesforce. And so that can sometimes be controversial. People can think that's a lot more money to do it that way. It takes more time to do it that way. And that all may be true, but the outcome, the adoption, the results that you get from your users loving the CRM, wanting to provide the right information, wanting to deliver to the business process far outweigh any kind of initial investment to get there, and the loyalty that it builds in your team, that people are listened to, that they're heard, that their opinion, because they're on the front lines, really matters, and they see that coming to fruition in their CRM, and they see their peers all benefiting from their ideas. The impact on that in the culture of a business is really significant. So it's well beyond just the CRM, but the CRM can be the catalyst. So I just wanted to highlight that you know what, some might not disagree, some might disagree with the approach. Everybody disagrees with the goals and the better outcomes. And so it's just making the argument and helping to kind of connect the dots and seeing how one results in another. All right. Now let's look about, before we jump into how we do this, I just want to provide a small motivation for what happens if we don't. Let's say we ignore all of this and we just continue kind of with the status quo, maybe using the defaults, maybe leaving it the way it's been for years. What are some of the things that we might see? And you might look at this list and see, I wonder if any of those things are occurring now in my organization or in my business. For example, you know, the team says that the system doesn't work and they don't use it. They just refuse to use it. It doesn't work for them. Maybe you've seen that. The new business process that was put into place inside Salesforce, it's not being finished or completed by the team, and therefore the downstream users who rely on Salesforce, they're not getting the information they need and they're blocked. The team starts to share that their CRM complaints, they put them up on Slack, and sometimes they even share them with customers. They might say something like, hold on, sir, I need to look up your information, and our system, it doesn't work very well. Please be patient because I have to use this stupid CRM to find your information. Sometimes that can come across to your customer because people are frustrated, not just with the way things work, but with their lack of any opportunity to make it work differently, right? So that's kind of a cultural signal inside the business. Another process was invented offline with no management visibility. So think about that circumstance, right? What's the impact on your customer if they start hearing that from your users? And then what happens when they drop off to Google Sheets or to Excel and they start doing their own process again, right? Basically abandoning what it is that you built in Salesforce. Now, many people employ the carrot and the stick and they try and have consequences for this. It's not the most effective means to get the job done, and often only results in minimal compliance rather than really maximizing the opportunity of leveraging the CRM, because the outcome delivered and the way it's delivered is what your team wanted after all. So it enables their work rather than simply, enabling compliance. And ultimately, it could turn into a small faction of disgruntled users inside the organization that start to leverage this as part of a bigger thing about, we don't feel listened to inside the organization. Certainly, this might be an extreme example, but CRM is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the day-to-day lives of your users. And so improving the digital quality of life of your users within the CRM can have a significant impact on how they align to other things in the business and how they go along with other changes and market changes and things like that. So it's you can see by these items here, there's significant risk in doing nothing. And Salesforce, the primary goal when it comes out of the box is to be accessible. And accessible means often simple, but often slower. And its emphasis is on, its emphasis is on being efficient, but not necessarily being relevant. So we're going to look at some examples there. All right. So there we got, we want to avoid the headaches, right? And so here's some examples. If you remember Office Olympics, right? You had a lot of winners who were doing the wrong thing at work. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to help people do the right thing and do the right thing well. As Peter Drucker says, there's nothing worse than doing the wrong things well in a business. And so we want to encourage people to do the right things and do them really well. And it's really important that your users want to do things well in order to get there. All right, so let's talk about a little bit of how to get this done. So remember our first aspect, going back to kind of user interface and our user experience kind of foundations, was clarifying what they see. So let's imagine that each card in the deck here is kind of like a data field. It's could be a formula field. It's something that the user cares about seeing and that's relevant to their work. So the way you would do this in Salesforce, right, is you would kind of put your fields on standard and custom objects, right? So custom fields, you would organize those into page layouts, right? And kind of put them into sections, may organize them in a way that's logical. You would leverage your compact and mini layouts, mini page layouts. So you can see what are the kind of key 4 fields, 5 fields that really people need to see at the top of the page. And then when I hover over, I'll look up some a related contact or a related account, what's the information that comes up on my mini page layout so I don't actually have to go to that page, right? So those are good uses for clarifying what people see. Dynamic forms are coming, so they're now available on custom objects and they're coming soon to standard objects. In the meantime, there's a flow component on unofficial SF that will enable you to bring dynamic forms to standard objects. And this adds a little bit more detail that you can now separate some of those cards or fields into different areas on the page. Very useful in clarifying what people see. the key here is to think about your personas, right? Those different sets of users, and to think about how can I be relevant to each of them, providing them what they're looking for, rather than being efficient, right? So what I see in many, many Salesforce orgs is efficiency, in that we're kind of putting all the fields on the page that anybody might use, creates a really, really long page with lots and lots of sections. And what you end up with is something like this, right? So nobody wants to play 52 card pickup with their records, but it happens all the time, which is, right? Find 3 of clubs. That's not what you want, right? So efficiency is not the goal here. Relevance is the goal. So organizing what people see kind of might change from person or persona to persona, that we don't need marketing to wade through a bunch of operations information. They just need to see what they need for marketing. And that helps people ramp up the want, because there's a lot less wading through information to get to what they need. All right, let's go to the second part now. Improve how they see it. So leveraging our card analogy, now we're not looking at all the cards, we're looking like a hand of cards. So this is kind of a selection of relevant fields that I want to see that really helps me accomplish what I want, because I have my hand, it's easy to hold, I can easily organize it. And how do we do that in Salesforce? So for example, Lightning page components like tabs, accordion, and the related list single component can help with this. It kind of now filters down what it is that we're looking at, and we can put them in different places depending on the priority of information that we want to show to our users. What's most important to those people and personas. We can leverage in-app guidance for changes and for clarity, right? This is a really under-leveraged part of Salesforce that Salesforce uses it themselves all the time. So for example, right now you might be seeing that it's talking about multi-factor authentication, right? Saying now is the time. It highlights, hey, that there's a new mobile configuration that you can put into place. You can use the same thing by highlighting to your users. Hey, we have a new section here. We have 2 new fields. We have, let me just clarify how this loan calculator works in Salesforce right here in context with video, visuals, and you can have a lot of preferences as far as showing it one time, once per week, every time the page loads. You get a lot of capability there. You can leverage the path, including coaching and key fields. And this is on any object, not just on leads and opportunities where it comes by default. So anywhere there's a process. So let's say you have account-based marketing. You want to have a path on your account. You want to have a path on your contacts to kind of indicate their proximity to the business, right? This is very useful to provide really, really unique and in-context information for your users, which help them know, right, what's the right hand that I want to have kind of in that moment. Reports. Okay, so reports and dashboards, they help kind of highlight a bit of the aggregate detail, right, and help drive that detail that shows kind of the incentives and what are the goals. You can set up those goals in reports and dashboards so they can begin to kind of see how this this data kind of flows up and is presented in a more clear way. And then a customized homepage. This is so key, providing your personas really a cockpit almost that shows, hey, what are the gauges and things that they care about? And the emphasis isn't on efficiency here, it's on relevance. And what I want to highlight is thinking about being protective of time for your team, right? Really protecting their time rather than simply asking them to be productive, right? Because if you're protecting their time and helping them to see what they need to see, not wade through the rest, but get really relevant detail, there's a sense that, right, that's going to help them have more of a desire to deliver on what the business is asking for while using that information. So that's how they see it. So we've gone what they see, now how they see it, and now let's go into why and when they want to see it. So continuing the card analogy, we're looking at now not only providing a hand, but providing the right hand during a game. Because when you think about what the CRM users are asked to do, so somebody calls and says, hey, I got a support issue, I need to know if this is a bug. that's essentially it's a context, right? And it could be thought of like a game, right? There's certain cards that are laid out on the table, and they need to find the right hand to play in that game. And that's the goal, is how do I get my users the right hand so they can win at that game more and more often, right? So what are the tools in Salesforce that can enable that? Well, one, leveraging global actions and default tabs. So global actions are those items either in the top right of your Salesforce CRM, right? Or in the bottom. You can also put some of these in your tray, right? When you're using Lightning. And you can leverage default tabs. And default tabs are when you go to a particular record, it's what is the tab that's shown first. Often I still see that even people who are not sales users, the activity tab shows first for them. So then they always have to go and click details. So they always have to go and click some other tab. So list view actions are another example. So they enable you to do something custom when you want to do it on multiple records at a time. Very useful. Record actions are those that are in context. When I'm looking at a particular record, what would I want to do on this record? So for example, maybe I want to spin up a new record that's related to this one, and I want to pre-fill it with certain values that are true based on what I'm looking at. Those kind of little helpers, they don't take a lot of effort to put in place, but they shave off time and they protect the time and effort of your team and can be a tremendous value to your users and make them want to deliver within the CRM. Visual flows can offer a tremendous amount of benefit here as well. So flow is really significantly increased in value and in its capabilities, especially right on a visual flow on a page over the last year and a half. And so think about when a user needs to do something from an account, for example, and it needs to interact with some related contacts, possibly some custom object records, right? Enabling them to do that through a simple wizard-like format right from the account page off of a button action is really, really valuable, and it saves them the time of having to navigate around all of those areas by just providing them a three-step process inside the flow. Very, very useful to help them see you can do this here and you can do it now. Now, component visibility filters are also really helpful. This is the ability for you to hide certain elements inside that component based on record data, or you can even have your own custom preferences. You can hide it from certain profiles. Really valuable tool here to, again, focus on what a user needs to see at any given time. So, and leveraging a console with and the utility bar. A console, I just would, I can't emphasize it enough. It provides that clarity that the real estate along the top, which is really valuable, is really focused on the records that your users are focused on, rather than simply object tabs that, you know what, I never use dashboards that much, or I don't really use opportunities over there, but yet it's consuming this really prime real estate at the top of the page. And so I recommend using the console, and I'll have an example of that here when we go through a sample scenario. So really think about being rapid here rather than just researchable, right? So it's not that the users could find it if they tried, but that I want to put it at a place that's rapid, that helps them find it quickly so they can be responsive on that phone call, so they can run a multi-threaded world because they got to help a lot of people while they're trying to get their own work done. So let's look at an example now, and we're going to look at Jessica. So she's a desktop user in the office. She really wants to support the team. So she's got a lot of desire. She wants to help. She just loves being that support. She's the first line of help for sales and marketing. So she's helping in kind of a pretty rapid environment, right? So sales and marketing, they sometimes have really timely questions and they need responses pretty quick. She likes to review performance reports, and so she helps build and deliver reports to the sales managers and to the marketing managers. She really likes data and what it can do to help move a team forward. She loves being recognized for her work, and she uses a laptop with a touchpad, and she wears glasses. And so this is important to think about what solution might we want to deliver that's a touchpad, has a little bit less dexterity and precision than a mouse, And so we want to think about that as we deliver a solution. And she really needs to enable work that stops and restarts, even to the next day. So it's really important that she remembers her context. She's often interrupted. She has to kind of leave something she was doing, go help somebody else do something, close that, and then come back to it without losing her place on what she was doing. So let's look at how we would apply those ingredients that we talked about earlier, those different Salesforce components, to deliver 2 scoops of delight to Jessica to help her love her CRM. So the first part of this is that we're going to move to a 2-column layout to maximize page use and readability. So by default, Salesforce will include a 3-column layout, which leaves a tremendous amount of wasted space in the left column, which is really valuable real estate. And often there are longer, maybe text area fields or things on the page that we want less word wrapping. And we want a little bit more kind of relaxed environment to be able to scale, to scan and consume the information. So moving to a 2-column layout for her would be good. You can see an example here in your Lightning app builder when you're modifying the page. Secondly, we're going to remove the quick links component. And this is something that is standard. It comes standard in Lightning. It was essentially a holdover from Classic because Classic had this functionality and they wanted to be backwards compatible. 2 things or multiple things that I find problematic with this. One, it shows all related lists that are on this page layout, regardless of what this particular user might care to see. So often they only really care or use 2 or 3 of these at most regularly, and the others are just kind of wasted space. This is a lot of code sent to the browser, so it can slow down and give a perceived slowness of Lightning, which has been a common complaint that over the years. And it takes a lot of dexterity to hover over one of these and then hover over the records. And so people accidentally click the wrong thing significantly on this component. So I recommend go ahead and push that little trash bin and never use this again. Another one is to move the related list component. So this is the default often in the right sidebar, kind of follows very similar behavior as the quick links. And I recommend creating a new tab. You can see it down here at the bottom called related and move it into there. So it's not that you're taking it away from people, you're just moving it away from the default view. And that way you can focus on a related list single component or 2, either in these other custom tabs that you created here, these second level nav tabs, what we call them, or in your right sidebar, you're only focusing on those related lists that really Jessica cares about. She doesn't really need to see a lot of other information. She just needs to see what helps her serve the sales and marketing team. That really helps her get to what she needs quickly. And we want to make sure that she's using a console app so that that valuable real estate along the top is used for the records that she's working with, not for the objects that she's often not working with. And so we want to make sure and give her the most efficient way to get work done, because she used to actually create multiple browser tabs to get this done in the standard app. And that consumes a lot of memory on her computer, which gives her, again, more perceived slowness. And so this helps her speed up the ability to speed up her experience on Salesforce, as well as put it all in one screen. So when she comes in the next morning, she loads up Salesforce, and guess what? All those tabs all reload. So she's basically right into what she was doing yesterday and continue finishing the work. You can also add there's a tray at the bottom, and a history app is very useful so that when someone calls in and says, hey, can you give me that record we were just talking about? What's the link? They can go through and quickly add, send those links via Slack, via Salesforce, go back and quickly grab records that she was looking at previously, opening up in the console view. Very simple. There's a lot of other very useful tools to put in that tray down there that are always visible. I've seen, simple text to put kind of like, links to common resources on the intranet, whatever it might be. Really useful, right at my fingertips, and makes it very simple to get what I need and makes Salesforce more valuable to me. Now here's a bonus. So a bonus, because Jessica loves data and she loves performance reports, why not give her a custom homepage that doesn't have the default that Salesforce gives us, it has a customized view that shows her metrics. How many cases is she closing? How many responses does she have to the needs of sales and marketing? If she can see that, you know what, on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, look at my performance. I love this. It's like immediate gratification. And now when she goes to talk to her manager, when she goes to the all hands, she knows the recognition that's coming. And that just motivates more of the same. And so that closing the loop and providing that immediate gratification through a custom homepage or elsewhere really helps your users love their CRM, and you're serving up 2 scoops of delight every day. All right, so my encouragement is you got this, you can make it happen. Be sure first, you gotta empathize with your team, you gotta ask the right questions, and you gotta be willing to hear it out, to partner with them on making it better. There's really no way that I see to help them love their CRM with first demonstrating your love for their opinions, for their complaints, and for their kind of valid input into where the CRM is going. All right, so we got a few minutes here for Q&A. Feel free to ask me about your users, the process, culture, any roadblocks, anything, any of the tools available to you. One question I see here is, do we have to move everybody over to the console, or can we break it up? And so that's a great question. And especially with many of these things that I've demonstrated today, Salesforce allows you to create a segment of your users. It could be small, it could be 1 or 2 power users that you want to just get their feedback, give them those kind of, those special tools to help them kind of, the industrial strength Salesforce. You can give them to them and basically segment it out. So you can have everybody continue, and you can deliver out the console, you can deliver out these custom lightning pages, even these actions and dynamic forms. You can really segment it so that only a small group of users can begin, and you can slowly let that grow over time. So it doesn't have to be wholesale. You can make it, you can pace yourself and make it very, very palatable and well organized and really low risk. That's the key, is to make it low risk, to make it easy, and to make users fall in love with their CRM because of your partnership with them. All right, I think that's our time for today. So any additional question I will follow up on, and appreciate your time today, and look forward to you having more of your users fall in love with your CRM as you let them use it the way that they work day to day.